Is May 19th, 2025, and our topic will be the GOP's big, beautiful tax and spending bill. I'm Ann Kim, Washington Monthly contributing editor, and I'm joined this morning by politics editor Bill Scher. So, Bill, reconciliation is your number one favorite topic. You've been talking about it for weeks on
Yes.
end, and now this is the week. There were some pretty big developments overnight. If you could kind of remind us of where we are in the posture of this bill going into this week. What happened last night, and what is this week going to look like?
So the House is putting together its version of the bill. Various components have gone through different committees like Ways and Means, Energy and Commerce, et cetera. It has to go through the Budget Committee, and then it has to go to Rules. So last week it was Budget Committee's turn. Apparently, the Budget Committee can't change it. They can't do amendments there, but it's a step in the process that is necessary because budget reconciliation has to be a budget bill, so that has to go to the Budget Committee. Uh, and there are four hardline Freedom Caucus types on Budget Committee. Earlier last week, they said this is not good enough. This doesn't cut Medicaid enough. This doesn't phase out the green energy credits in the Inflation Reduction Act enough. This doesn't reduce the deficit enough. It doesn't reduce the deficit at all as it stands. So they refused to. So they actually voted down. They actually brought it to a vote. Sometimes the leadership says, "Oh, I don't have the vote. Let's not even have the vote." They had the vote. They lost. They regrouped afterwards, and late last night they had another vote where those four Republicans voted present,
Hmm.
which allowed a majority to advance the bill. And they did so after getting some sort of promises for concessions. Again, they can't change the bill literally in this committee, but they had a promise to, one of the issues with the Medicaid cuts from the right wing perspective is that the provisions didn't kick in until like 2029, and they
Hmm.
want the quote unquote savings to be front loaded. So they have a promise from Speaker Johnson to make that change, and a promise to phase in the termination of the green energy credits sooner as well. I'm not sure if they said what year yet. Um, and some talk about changing the reimbursement structure for how states get reimbursed, which is a big deal. And a number of these things might well lose votes on the moderate side.
Hmm.
That
Sure.
hasn't even really been, so the deal hasn't been cut all around. There isn't a consensus that's been publicly acknowledged from all camps. This is just enough to get those four Freedom Caucus types say, okay, I won't kill it in the crib today. I'll let the bill advance, but we're saying this is still not good enough. And you're causing some agita on the moderate side as well. So it's still at a very precarious place.
Hmm. Now, this is committee hearing they had at 10 o'clock last night on a Sunday, which is pretty unusual for Congress. So, what is for that committee? So, what is the urgency? What's supposed to happen this week?
I mean, I don't know off the top of my head when Rules is supposed to take it up now. I mean, I believe the House had a self-imposed deadline of Memorial Day to get this done,
Hmm.
which may well not happen. And the Treasury Secretary says he wants the whole thing done, House, Senate, on the president's desk by July 4th. And the Senate hasn't even weighed in on what the House is doing right now, and there's various people expressing displeasure. So whether they can really fast track this at this point is very, very unclear. I haven't even mentioned the SALT component to this. This is the state and local tax
Right.
deduction issue that some in New York and California and New Jersey don't like the status quo, where there's a very low cap on how much you can deduct from your federal taxes, what you pay in state and local taxes. This hits the higher tax states, particularly upper income areas, very hard. But for example, and so you have a bunch of Republicans, even some Democrats, saying this is just a sop to wealthy folks in on the coast. Who cares about them? But if you're on Long Island, like Nick Lalada saying,
Mhm.
hey, if you're making $250K on Long Island, that's middle class for you because that's just a high income, high cost of living area. So this is not about millionaires and billionaires. These are people who just are trying to get by in a high income area, a high cost of living area, and you're not taking their concerns seriously. But I do. And in fact, Lalada posted on X over the weekend. Forgive me for trying to look it up, in real time. I know that's not great content, but he was basically making an argument for not passing the bill at all and allowing the old tax rates to uh, snap back into place.
Wow.
The big issue here is that the 2017 tax cut package that Trump enacted had sunset dates on a lot of the provisions. So where's that thing here?
And it's worth pointing out here that it's the moderate Republicans, the ones who are in kind of purplish competitive places, that are the ones most agitating for the higher salt cap. And Speaker Johnson should listen to them because their majority is so slim, they really can't afford to lose any of these folks, right?
Well, and Mike Lawler has made that point explicitly. You have, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, these folks aren't real Republicans, they're rhinos, the heck with them. And they're saying, you have a majority because of us. You would not be in this position without us. And if we lose in 2026, you're not going to have a majority at all. In fact, Lalada said explicitly, this is a few days ago on X, we wouldn't have a House Republican majority without SALT Republicans, Lawler, Garbarino, Young Kim, Tom Keene. These are all New York, California, New Jersey. And Republicans won't have a majority in 2026 if the one big beautiful bill doesn't fix the 2017 cap on SALT. So he's making that very plain. I'm sorry, I can't find this post is eluding me. But he basically, it said, maybe he took it down. He basically said that if the bill, if the one big beautiful bill doesn't pass and the Trump tax cuts expire, that means the SALT cap goes away and you have a higher taxes on the upper income bracket from like 37 to 39 and change, which Trump himself has expressed sympathy towards. I mean, this violates like basic principles of Republican orthodoxy. But excuse me for the dog is upset about something. And so here's Lalada saying, hey, you know what? You can't turn the screws on me by saying, hey, if you let this bill die, it's gonna be a tax increase on people. He's saying, I don't care. I actually think it's a good thing. Now, does he mean it? Is he really going to the mat on this? I don't know, but Johnson's being squeezed on both ends of the spectrum here, and that's not resolved by this bill advancing last night.
Right. Well, and the other thing too is that if this bill does not pass, then you don't have an extra $4.5 trillion being added to the debt, and maybe our credit rating will go back up. Moody's on Friday downgraded the United States we lost our last AAA credit rating. And so this really is going to be reflected probably in the bond markets already, I believe. And I had heard the Dow futures were already down last night. I don't know how the market's performing today, but it's really bad news to be adding so much more to the national debt and deficits at this point in time, given what's happening.
Well, it makes Johnson's job harder. I mean, the bill as it stands does not reduce the deficit. It's not even deficit neutral. I mean, and that's what Johnson promised. I mean, that's how he got the gavel in the first place. The Freedom Caucus type said they were told that's what was going to happen with any tax and spending bill. And Johnson reiterated that a couple of times between January and today. And that's not how the bill has been scored. I mean, these are all preliminary analyses based on pieces of the bill, and there's room for changes to be made. But what we've seen from the Congressional Budget Office, what we've seen from the Joint Committee on Taxation, and I think we discussed this before. It's heartwarming that we're getting on the level numbers from these people. They're not being funny with smoke and mirrors, so they can claim deficit neutrality or deficit reduction without it being true. And there are plenty of times when Republicans would just say, as Dick Cheney famously said, deficits don't matter. We're going to give you a tax cut. We don't care about the deficit. And we may end up there again. I can't promise you that they're not going to just finally say we just got to have a bill and whatever. But you have Chip Roy and the other Freedom Caucus guys saying it does matter. We've been fiscally responsible in the past. We're not going to do it again. And so to have Moody's come in and saying this is so bad that we're going to downgrade your credit rating. And I'm not even someone who, I mean, I think a different agency did it on Biden's watch, and I kind of thought it was a little dirty pool. I thought it was getting a little too political, and not really. It wasn't really true that like we weren't able to meet our debt obligations. So I don't want to give them too much credit.
Yeah.
But just as a straight political matter, it gives ammunition to the Chip Roys to say, okay, I asked for X, Y, and Z. Now I'm asking for A, B, and C too, because you even with my changes, you haven't even gotten this to deficit neutrality, and that's really important. Is he going to take it that far? I don't know, but he's got the cover from Moody's to do that if he wants to push it that far.
Well, let's dig into a little bit more about what the Freedom Caucus guys want, because basically what they want is the bill to be meaner. And there are some really serious implications, in particular about Medicaid cuts that they have planned. And, it poses a political problem too, if they do, in fact, speed up the implementation of the work requirements. For instance, they're speeding up from 2029 to 2027. So you're having like drastic Medicaid cuts that may come into play right before the election, right? I mean, isn't that part of what the Freedom Caucus folks are looking for? Like things that will make it much harder.
Before I answer, do you need me to get this dog to be quiet? Am I ruining the entire show?
Sure.
Okay. So if we need to edit or something, we can do that. But I sort of
No
can try
problem.
to see what I can do. She's got water. I don't know what she's complaining about. Let's let her ride.
Okay, let's keep going.
So the question is, how mean is this getting? I mean, this is a big issue for the moderate side of the party, the swing districts, and the Senate. I mean, I think everybody knows that cutting Medicaid cannot be spun as just taking health insurance away from freeloaders or undocumented immigrants. I mean, there is some of those issues that are in play here, but it goes well beyond that. And Trump and Johnson have said it's just waste, fraud, and abuse. We want savings and waste, fraud, and abuse. Which who can be against that, right? And Chip Roy is saying, hey, we're subsidizing healthcare for able-bodied people who aren't willing to work. We want work requirements. And your work requirements is something that I think most Republicans would accept. But the bill is being scored depending on what analysis we've seen from CBO. Apparently, they're slicing it differently depending on who's putting out the numbers. We've seen 7.6 million losing insurance. We've seen 8.6 million losing insurance. And
10, yeah.
And as Steve Bannon will tell you, hardly a squish. You got a lot of MAGA voters in that pool.
Yeah.
You got young males in that pool. And so it's not just a sort of a bunch of deadbeats. And you have plenty of people in swing districts saying this could mean losing the majority. This could mean losing my seat. And maybe I'm better off letting the bill die if you're putting me in that position.
Yeah. And I also want to point out that the majority of non-elderly people who are on Medicaid already work. The huge number of people who will say work at Walmart, have wages that are too low, and then they work part-time and they don't qualify for the company's benefits. So they're on Medicaid. And it's ludicrous to say that people on Medicaid don't work, because they do. And what happened in Georgia, for instance, is a perfect example of what will happen when the work requirements come into play. Under a waiver, they put work requirements in a couple of years ago. Not very many people signed up for the pathways to coverage or whatever they called that program. And a lot of money ended up going to contractors who are administering the bureaucratic burdens. The GOP is counting on the bureaucratic hassles of having to account for activities in order to be able to push people off the rolls. It's just a backdoor way of cutting working people off of Medicaid and calling it savings and calling it preventing waste, fraud, and abuse when it really isn't. So just wanted to make that clear.
And this is a lot of this is byproduct from Obamacare, which expanded Medicaid, and so it was a way to get more working class people to have health coverage, and it has worked, and it is serving people who are not necessarily Democrats.
Yeah.
And when you get down to brass tacks, and you're taking something away from people who have gotten accustomed to it. I mean, this is why Republicans didn't want the bill to pass in the first place. They knew once you delivered the benefit, it was going to be very hard to take back. And now we're in that place now where it's not even known as Obamacare to most people. It's just the health insurance that I'm getting. And we saw Republicans struggle with this in the first Trump administration. First time around, their first order of business was to try to pass through reconciliation. This is and it was all about a reconciliation bill. This is a way to pass legislation that circumvents the filibuster in the Senate. There's a provision in the rules that allows for that, so long as it's budget-related measures. And they tried to do an Obamacare repeal through reconciliation, party line vote. We can do this. Everyone hates Obamacare, the Republican Party. This should be a slam dunk. Guess what? You found 3 Republicans who didn't agree in the Senate, John McCain, Susan Collins, and Lisa Murkowski, and the bill died. And then Republicans licked their wounds and said, well, we can't do that, but we can at least do tax cuts. We're good at that. And they tried a budget reconciliation bill with just the tax cuts. It actually had a little bit of Obamacare in there. They repealed the individual mandate, the part in there. And they got that one passed. And it's only because a faction of the party is trying to take deficit reduction seriously, which they hadn't done in the last 40 plus years, that they're trying to marry tax cuts with healthcare cuts. And that makes the job a lot harder because with margins this narrow, it only takes 4 to say no thank you. And they haven't, solved that puzzle yet.
Plus, there's going to be some other little bombs in this bill as well. Trump, for instance, had promised no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. And it's kind of in the bill, but it's probably a lot less than meets the eye, right?
Well, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security benefits. A lot of this stuff skews more upper middle class than it sounds on its face. Not as much with the tips, but overtime and Social Security benefits, those definitely skew higher. The thing with the tips is just that it can be gamed. So how much benefit
everyone's going to ask for
people
tips.
get? Yeah,
right.
So these are all kind of bumper stickery things that are not designed to make for efficient, sensible tax policy, let alone deficit reduction. I mean, one of the big things with tax on tips, and this is something that whether it's good or not for society, I don't know. But as far as like my personal satisfaction, I like that Trump. The one thing that Trump did that I like is the high standard deduction. So a much higher standard deduction limit than before. So I used to have to do the itemization, and now I don't. Maybe for all I know, I should be doing the itemization. Maybe we should be better off. Maybe this is bad for tax policy because it's not bringing as much revenue. I just know on tax day, it makes my filling out the form process a lot easier. And I think it's true for a lot of people. And because of that, if you're in a lower income bracket that you can take advantage of that, the no tax on tips things isn't going to help you because you're not itemizing.
Right.
So that's one of the big issues here. So none of this it was made to win Nevada. It was not made to make for a smart, sensible, cohesive tax policy. And all those things make it harder to cut the deficit, which is what supposedly they're trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. There's one poison pill in particular too that I really marveling at the evil genius, the evil of it, really. And that's the proposed expansion of the child tax credit to $2,500, but only if the parents can provide Social Security numbers. And the reason I think that that's so diabolical is that under current law, you can't get a child tax credit unless you're a citizen, if the child is a citizen, and the parents can claim the tax credit on behalf of their citizen child, even if they themselves don't have Social Security numbers but have an I-10. But now they're going to change the rules so that the parents have Social Security numbers too. So what you're doing actually is operationalizing the idea of no birthright citizenship,
Mm-hmm.
as well as depriving children of this families of this very much needed tax credit. So there's all sorts of little horrible things in there that I think, well, this raises another topic. How should Democrats be playing this opportunity, or playing against this bill because of provisions like this, but also because of the other horrific changes that this big beautiful bill are going to be imposing upon the tax system and upon our budgets.
Well, when you have a target-rich environment, you got to prioritize. You can't attack everything, and it's probably not the strongest line of attack to talk about the
Sure.
provisions that deal with the undocumented immigrants. Obviously, you make the case. I think you made it very, very ably and conscientiously there. Uh, but I think the Medicaid piece hits a broader swath of voters. Uh, and and Democrats do have to ask: do they want to get into the Moody's thing? Do they want to get into the deficit reduction thing? Because if they push that hard, are they going to then be on the hook to say, well, now you're in charge. What are you going to do to cut the
Right.
deficit? And of course, what they would likely say is, well, we'll happily raise taxes on the wealthy. Um, and maybe those numbers cost out well enough that they can justify that. But the tougher part of the credit rating question is entitlements. And that was
Mm-hmm.
specified in the Moody's statement. And what Democrats want to do to constrain the growth of Social Security and Medicare, that's a much, much touchier subject that they may not really want to get into. But, you know, perhaps they could still, without touching that third rail, they could still say this bill doesn't do anything to ensure the wealthy pay their fair share while making sure those in the working class get stuck with the bill on health care. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is enriching himself and his buddies while he's gallivanting amongst sheiks and emirs in the Arab world. There's all sorts of targets of opportunity there to talk
Contrast.
about
Yeah.
that I think would be very animating for the average voter.
Yeah. Um, so as far as like the Democratic strategy, there was a little bit of a splash last week too when Gavin Newsom announced that he wanted to cut Medicaid benefits for undocumented immigrants in his state. And part of that seems like a play to move toward the center in preparation for a presidential run. But what's your opinion of whether that is good strategy, not just for Newsom, but for Democrats generally on these topics of, you know, entitlements plus immigration?
I think Gavin Newsom is self-destructing in front of our eyes. I don't get. I mean, this is whatever you think about Gavin Newsom. I thought he's always been a pretty savvy political player, uh, and he always had a bit of a tenuous relationship with the progressive base. But by going in very forcefully in defense of Biden and kind of showing his fluidity and talking about the Biden record, I thought he was sort of maintaining decent relationship there. As I've always said, elections are base plus swing. You can't you don't want to punch either in the mouth if you can avoid it. Um, uh, and Newsom has gone on this journey post election where he feels like the Democratic brand is so bad, uh, and he needs to sort of figure out what went wrong. So he's going to start this podcast. He's going to talk to far right figures like Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon, and sort of figure out what went wrong. And he's going to talk about it in this sort of oddly open way where for example, he was telling Democrats, this Garcia case, this guy who got abducted and sent to an El Salvador prison, that's an 80-20 issue for Republicans. That's a distraction. We should be talking about the economy. Like, if you're running for if he is still running for high office, don't talk like a pundit. Don't talk about 80-20 issues. Talk about what is good policy and what are your convictions. So right there, I thought he was, and on top of that, he's actually wrong with that being an 80-20 issue. It may be that the average person doesn't want criminals to come here illegally, but all the polling has showed that most Americans think it's wrong that we abducted this guy for without cause. So I think just biffed that completely. And so now to triple down with saying, I'm going to take away health care from undocumented immigrants. I mean, look, I don't think Democrats necessarily should lead with their chin and defend it openly when you have other more opportune issues to talk about. But it doesn't mean you have to throw people under the bus either. I mean, you can be sotto voce about these things and be strategic. And to say, where you have a very large population of undocumented children and take away healthcare from them, you're just going to get attacked as being cruel. And that's going to make it very, whatever theoretical benefit it might have in a general election, which I think is dubious in itself, that's pretty toxic, I think, for a Democratic primary.
Yeah, I think the cruelty point is potentially effective against Republicans too, and regardless of what people think about undocumented people. The thought of undocumented children, or oftentimes citizen children, right, of undocumented parents who are probably going to be accidentally denied all sorts of benefits. The cruelty is the point for the Republicans, and it just doesn't make sense for Newsom to be embracing.
I'll say one thing in sympathy with Newsom here, and this may be where his head is at. He's actually not thinking about running for president; he's just thinking about surviving as governor for his last term. These moral positions can be expensive, and Newsom has a difficult budget problem. There's no story that came out recently that the California law that puts municipalities on the hook for various abuse claims is just bankrupting them. Who could argue against people getting just settlements for abuse claims? Of course they should get that, and of course children should get health insurance. But someone's got to make the numbers add up. He can't be like the federal government and just print his own money and sell all the T-bills that he wants. The numbers have to add up somehow. So he's probably in a very hard position there. I'm not saying the way he's going about it is the right way to do it, but I'm not the person who knows the California budget inside and out and what other options there would be to save money. If you're going to do something, as on its face horrible as taking away health insurance from kids, you better have a darn good explanation why you have to do that. You have to be able to say, like, I really am, I'm out of options here because I can't do these 10 other things. I haven't heard that from him. I'm not in California and have to familiar with the budget there. But it is hard to be a governor and have to balance your budget. You don't, because you just can't run deficits. So that, I imagine that might be part of the mix here.
Yeah. Another news, terrible, tragic news about former President Joe Biden over the weekend. And it's another body blow after the release of the recording with the so-called her tapes yesterday or last week as well. What's your take on how Democrats should be reacting to all of this news about former President Biden?
Well, I would hope we start to have this media cycle that I really impose top down, not bottom up. This notion that if you're thinking about running for president or you're thinking about how to fix the Democratic brand, you have to say that there was some kind of cover up, or you have to be held to account for your role in defending Joe Biden's faculties. And if you were someone who we're defending in real time. You have to, you commit political suicide, bow out, say you were wrong. This kind of like, what did you know? When did you know it? Kind of scandal coverage, which I think is uncalled for here. I was a defender of Joe Biden up until the debate, and then I said, okay, that's a massive red flag, and he should bow out. And I even wrote a piece talking about the parallels to Woodrow Wilson, who we now know from medical historians was suffering from a form of dementia before anyone really recognized it, and it began to exacerbate after he experienced smaller strokes while he was in Europe, and then there was the big stroke in the fall of 1919 that fairly incapacitated him and led to his wife, essentially running the show, unbeknownst to the public. So that is defensible. And I'm not saying that Joe Biden was doing anything nearly that severe, but it did raise the question whether there's some sort of underlying condition that had been going on that wasn't properly diagnosed. That we need to look and it's very hard to diagnose in real time. So I'm not arguing there isn't something to raise an eyebrow here with. That's not the same as people knowing that he had some kind of condition and purposefully covering it up, because these things happen gradually. And what is confusing to a lot of us, those who are defending him, for example, when he spoke at the State of the Union in 2020, that guy looked okay. Not like maybe top of his game, but cogent, articulate, understood what he was talking about, could have not just reading from a script, ad-libbing with the crowd. It can make you say, well, he had that bad day the other day, but that seemed pretty good. I guess he's all right. I mean, sure, we all age, but let's not be ageist. It's not just say, hey, just because you walk a little stiffly, or you stumble over your words, or you forget a name or two, that's not the same as dementia that you can't do the job. So it's just hard to know the difference sometimes in real time. And maybe in hindsight, you could say, yeah, that guy should have resigned a long time ago. That's something that the medical historian should try to investigate over the next several years. But you don't have to destroy people's careers for not getting it right in real time. And as far as where the Democrat Party goes from here, who cares? It's got nothing to do with what policies we need to clean up the rubble that's being created from Donald Trump. So maybe this diagnosis might get people to feel a little more sympathetic to the situation and say, you know what, it's just not the thing to be focused on here. We have 10 other 5-alarm fires to worry about that we need to think about how we're going to get out of this mess.
Yeah. And one would hope that the same calculation would occur on the Republican side. I get the feeling, though, that Donald Trump won't be able to help it, and he's just going to continue to use President Biden as a foil. And
Trump Jr.'s already started.
In a way that will really hurt him in the long run.
I mean, Trump Jr. is now trying to put forth a conspiracy that they knew about the cancer beforehand. They're trying to cover that up, which of course is totally baseless. But they only know how to be mean. They only know how to punch down. And to some extent, I mean, he won, even without a popular majority, he won. Knowing this about him, knowing that he is someone who is combative and petty and petulant and vindictive, everyone knew that. But the bargain with him, for those who voted for him, was, well, it's all going to work out for me in the end. The economy is going to be better, and so I'll tolerate his crude behavior so long as it works out for me. Today, people are a lot less confident it's going to work out for me. So trying to distract with attacks on Joe Biden aren't going to play as well when he is actively mismanaging the economy.
So aside from the budget bill, what else are you watching for this week?
I mean, between that and Joe Biden, that's a lot of it. I do think we want to see if this Biden news cycle, gets nipped in the bud because of the sympathy that's involved. And on the reconciliation, Trump is back home from his Arab trip, and he is trying to use his bully pulpit to get the bill passed. He tried to dress down Walmart for saying they're going to raise prices.
Yeah.
Uh, all these things do interconnect. If people are mad about higher prices and Trump's popularity sinks because of it, it is harder for him to use the bully pulpit to get the budget reconciliation bill passed. If you're trying to get people to pass something that is a political risk, the president wants to be able to say it's riskier to undercut me because we're all in this together, and if my numbers go down, we're all going to go down. And that becomes harder if Republicans make the calculation, maybe it's just you going down. Maybe I can save myself if the part was making you go down is this horrible bill, on top of the fact that the economic situation is chaos and no one thinks this bill is going to fix it. So I'm better off putting you to the side and saying, I'm going to let this bill die and push for an end in tariff policy. And we don't have a lot of evidence that Trump has great salesmanship skills, bully pulpit skills when he is in office. When he's out of office and he can point fingers at others who are in charge, much better. In office, things happening on your watch, and trying to pass them on others, not as good. And he got the market to kind of cool down for a bit by rolling back some tariffs, but the tariffs that remain are still quite high, and we haven't even felt the impact of those yet because they were imposed at the top of April. We're now in mid-May, and the Walmart announcement is you're going to start feeling it soon, and we're bracing you for that fact. So Trump tends to always want to just win today's news cycle and worry about tomorrow later. Well, tomorrow is becoming today very, very soon, and that's going to be very hard for him.
Mm-hmm. Plus, there was an announcement over the weekend too that he's going to start imposing unilateral tariffs across the board to random countries based on who knows what criteria, rather than trying to negotiate 60 trade agreements all at the same time. So that change in strategy, I'm sure, will also add a lot of uncertainty to inflation, prices, everything.
I mean, he has contradictory messages and policy aims, at least from what he says on the surface. He wants you to feel better when he pulls tariffs back because he wants the market to calm, and he wants to make you feel better about whatever price increases do occur because, hey, well, at least he eased up over here. And so it's a constant smoke and mirrors shell game. I got all these deals going with all these countries. It's going to be amazing. And the bazaar is open. So, hey, country X, if you don't do a deal with me, well, then you get the tariff. But the deals are available to you over here if you so want them. So it's never fully clear if his end game is to get low tariffs for us, so the cost of their goods go down, or if he wants high tariffs for high tariffs' sake, and he just wants to have some selective breaks for whoever's going to give him a deal. It's going to make me rich him personally, some real estate deal for his family business, or just to be able to try to keep people off balance and say, don't feel so bad about these increases because we got these deals over here. It's balls and plates in the air to try to avoid, in his words, in 1929. And I think at some point you run out of runway.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Bill. It's great talking to you, and we'll see what unfolds this week.
Great to talk to you as well. Take care.
And our guest this morning was politics editor Bill Scher, Washington Monthly, and we'll see you here next week. Take care, everyone.